Today, I'll be presenting on the Binukot, the Elusive Maiden. A very overlooked part of the Philippine history is the indigenous women of the Philippines. While most studies focus on men, war, and various leaders, hardly any historical texts recall the significant women who lived during these times. The only group of women that is commonly mentioned throughout many indigenous communities are the Babaylan. They were a group of shamans that could heal and connect with the spirit world. They were a group of older women that were chosen by spirits who could perform ceremonies and rituals and were involved in social, political, and economical aspects of their community. Besides the Babaylan, another group of women were called the Binukot. While the Binukot had connections with the spiritual world, it was to a lesser extent than in comparison with the Babaylan. Unlike the Babaylan, they were daughters that were chosen by their families. They did not work or meet together in groups, and they were mostly unseen by the community. While the Babaylan had known and respected power throughout their community, the Binukot exercised more elusive power. On the island of Panay, this unique cultural practice called Binukot took place throughout all provinces and is still practiced today in the remote parts of Panay. The island of Panay is located in the western part of the Visayas, and the region is divided into 4 provinces: Aklan, Antique, Capiz, and Iloilo. The word Binukot means wrapped up, confined, secluded, or restricted. The root word bukot means be blanketing, be swaddling oneself. The Binukot women were daughters that were hidden in small rooms because they were not allowed to be seen by males. The reason for this seclusion was to place higher value on the woman for potential suitors. The Binukot women were known throughout the land for their beauty, and they were desired by rulers and strong warriors. These light-skinned, frail young women were treated like princesses, and they brought great honor to their family. The Binukot lived in seclusion, so it was rare that natives could catch a glimpse of them. It made it hard for the cultural practice to be noticed and recorded in history. Most information comes from epics and stories. To better understand what the practice entails, we can also look at the vocabulary from the early Philippine language. Francisco de San Antonio, who recorded some vocabulary for the Philippine language, defined the Tagalog term bukot as to be cloistered like a nun. Alonso de Mentrida, who wrote about languages in Panay, defined bukot as to have daughters who do not go down from the house, or to have them in seclusion, the room, or the retreat. The first epic I'll be talking about is the Maranao epic, Darangen. It tells the story of a princess or leaman who lives in a hidden room. To pass time in the isolated room, she would engage in activities such as weaving and embroidery. Most of the clothes worn by the men in the family were woven by her. A common embroidery design is the banog or hawk. The room itself is called a lamin, and it is located above the royal house. The design inside the room portrays nature. So in this picture on the right, that is the lamin. The next epic, the Boholano epic, Bung Bung Humasanan. Bung Bung Humasanan was a beautiful woman. She was described like the sun when it spreads its first rays over the world, or like a sudden flash of lightning, so secluded and closed in her chamber that nobody ever saw her except by the cheerish chants. She was pursued by Datu Datung Sumanga, who was the great hero in the epic. She would not accept him right away and instead exercised her power by sending him on ridiculous quests, such as raiding villages or fetching items on remote islands. He did comply, and it showed the power she had, as well as the great extent that Datu would go to get her hand in marriage. These epics and stories give us a clue as to what the Binukot tradition entails and how it was practiced. It tells stories of daughters who were secluded at a young age to be ready for marriage. For the practice itself, the Binukot was not allowed to be seen by a man from childhood until puberty. She was separated from the rest of her family from 3 to 4 years old. The only people that were allowed to come in contact with her were her family members and female servants. The girl's parents and servants would help her with tasks that included bathing or doing work. Because she had to avoid others' gaze as well as the sun, she would have to bathe in the river in the evening, often in an enclosure that was made specifically for her. For entertainment, she was allowed to weave, and her family presents her with oral lore and traditional dances. This made her an exceptional storyteller and dancer. Occasionally, she was brought to big gatherings where young men could admire her beauty and watch her perform a ritual dance. At the age of 13 or 14 years old, a Binukot is ready for marriage. To be a Binukot was not only a daughter's obligation to her parents, but also brought fame and respect to the family, who were now seen as part of the high society. Because the Binukot needed servants, and not everyone could afford servants, having a Binukot daughter showed wealth. For their image, they appeared elusive and mysterious. Other descriptions include appear like the sun, shine like a star, be as pale as the moon, and beautiful beyond compare. These descriptions taken from epics really accentuate the beauty and alluring power of the Binukot. While this is true, it was forbidden to look at her, and no man would dare to look because this act could be punished by death. According to the illustration of the Spanish historian Francisco Alcina, the Binukot clothing consists of a long skirt with designs on the end, a long sleeve top, and a long veil. In this picture, she is pictured next to the Datu. One question I received was, is the Binukot oppressed or are they empowered? You would think that they are oppressed because they live in isolated rooms and they seem to have everything done for them by servants. However, in epics, the Binukot are portrayed in powerful and authoritative ways. For example, from research, I read that Binukot and Datus are actually equal in power, influence, and status. Other epics, such as the Boholano epic, Bang Bang Humasanan, show how Datus would do anything for her. She is also a master at traditional weaving, storytelling, and dancing, which is very important and respected part of indigenous culture. I think that even though she was secluded in her own room and isolated, she was still very empowered. Some known Binukot, Conchita Gilbalinga, also known as Lola Conchita, was a known Binukot, and she shares that she wasn't allowed to be exposed to the sun, work in the farm, or be seen by other people. She was given the best clothes and food and was treated like a princess. In isolation, she was able to master panubok, which is Panay Bukidon's traditional hand embroidery. When she was ready to marry, the person with the highest bid became her husband. From her personal experience, she remembers the time when she looked through the keyhole in her door and saw her first husband, a World War II lieutenant. When they both saw each other, they felt that they were in love. But sadly, this did not last long because he was killed while on an assignment in Baguio City. In her second marriage, she had 2 children, both who passed away at a young age during the war. Her second husband passed shortly after as well. Although the Binukot were known for their beauty, they were also known for their wisdom and, of course, their extraordinary embroidery skills. During her interview with Rhea Penaflor, Lola mentioned she was proud of her embroidery because not many people could do the complex designs that she could. The last known Binukot was Rosita Caballero, and she was from Panay Bukidnon. She passed away at the age of 73 years old. Her experience was similar to Lola's, however, she did have a lot of grandchildren. So this is an image of Rosita Caballero and Lola Conchita. Rosita Caballero is wearing the traditional clothing, the red color, and the pattern around the neckline. She's also wearing large necklaces and earrings, and her headpiece is also a common part of the Binukot attire. There is very limited information on the Binukot practice because they were so unseen in society. Evidence gathered from epics show that the Binukot did play an important role because she was a desired maiden for powerful datus and those of higher rankings or social statuses. Because she was sought after by many, a Binukot had more power than she realized. She was an exceptional storyteller, weaver, and dancer, which are important aspects of indigenous culture. Even though they were elusive and mostly unseen, the Binukot were an important figure in indigenous cultures.